Etsy confirms that sellers can use AI and still be considered handmade. And this came directly from Josh Silverman, the CEO of Etsy. And well, he basically said, yeah, you can use AI. Probably some things that are still going to need to be monitored. But Chris, I wanted you to look into this article a little bit and what was being said, and maybe we can get a little bit more clarity on what this actually means for people that are using AI in their designs. So what did you discover?
Yeah, so this one came to us from Value Added Resource, and they're quoting an interview from Axios and chiefmarketer.com where Josh Silverman came out and he said, look, I think AI assisted creations should be listed as handmade. And what he said specifically was, we had some discussions about it, whether it's handmade or not. Does this actually belong on Etsy? So it's good to know, Scott, at the very least, that they did have a conversation about this, or maybe he had it in his own head, but somebody thought about it from that perspective. Do these products belong on Etsy? And we ultimately decided that it was basically the same thing as electronic dance music, right? For somebody to say that somebody using a synthesizer to create music is not music because they didn't play all of the instruments themselves, that doesn't feel right. So we think that AI assisted designs, much in that same way, are assisting the creative process and should be considered handmade enough to sell within the Etsy platform, right? And they're saying, I think the collaboration between humans and machines, which is a terrifying phrase, to generate art is actually going to be the next frontier. So they think AI art, AI assisted design is the next big thing. I think I would agree with that to some extent. AI assistance in pretty much everything is going to be the next big thing. And, you know, then this article, like most of the other articles talking about this, kind of talks a little bit about some of the downsides of AI. But the real headline to me here is that even though they've allowed it on the platform, I don't know that we've seen an explicit statement before saying, look, we think that this is a tool just like any other tool. And as long as you comply with the other rules of the platform, there's nothing wrong with using AI in your design.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean it's interesting, but there's still going to be discrepancies, I think. And is there anything there that so is that a quote from him? I think right now where the capability
where we are with the capability, we're further ahead than where people are comfortable with, right?
Yeah.
And he used that to say, you know, our AI is so good that people are uncomfortable. And the reason they were talking about that is he was talking about, this is something we talked about at the end of Q1. And I think we covered the story later on where they were going to roll out an AI sales assistant and people hated it. People just didn't like it. And so they pulled back. It doesn't mean that that's going to go away. Walmart, I know, is working on something similar, right? Shopify is where everybody that's in the e-commerce space is working on a way to replace that search bar across the top with a way to more easily find your product. And they think that AI is the way to do that. But all of the experiences, including the experiences that Etsy has had with their AI sales assistant, not so hot. They still think it's the future, and they think that the design side of this is great, and it's not going anywhere.
Yeah. So basically what you're saying is they're playing around with AI themselves. They're finding that their AI for chatbot stuff not working so well. And they're looking at, well, as a creator, using AI could be beneficial because now that can help the creator be even more creative, right? Because we've talked about this. If you're just creating AI designs strictly almost like copy and paste, then that takes away from the handmade or the person that's actually putting time and effort into creating something. I'm wondering, how are they going to determine how someone just didn't create a whole bunch of designs quickly without a lot of thought, without a lot of design, and they just slap them up there? Is that going to be okay? Maybe they'll let it be like, well, let the customer decide, let the customers say if they're happy with it or not. I don't know how they'll deal with that.
Yeah, so I guess in my mind, and I'm sure I'm going to light the comments on fire here. I'm wondering where that line would be, if that line exists at all, right? So if you could create something in Photoshop by drawing the blocks, right? You start with a square and then you add a circle on it and somehow you turn that into a person, right?
Yeah.
And I can type into Adobe's AI, give me a person, and we both get a similar looking person. At the end of the day, what's the difference other than the skill set? And I think that's where a lot of people get where they want to stand their ground on certain things, especially in the art world, right?
Yep.
But getting what you want out of AI is not a sure thing usually. And so what typically happens is you'll see people using elements. And I think pretty much everybody would agree that creating elements is okay, because it would be no different than going to a stock element website or a stock photo website and buying something from there, right? That weird line starts to pop up when you're saying, all right, let's do some wall art, and you just create the entire thing in one go in Midjourney or wherever. But is it really different than taking the individual elements? That I don't know. I found it extremely interesting that they basically said, yes, they actually did give it a green light instead of a non-answer, which has been their stance basically up until now. It wasn't not allowed. Now it's explicitly allowed, and they're saying they think that this is going to be the future, and they're considering it handmade. Now, Scott, there is something that I know is going to come up in the comments. Etsy loves AI for canceling accounts. Like if you have something, it's gonna block your account. Like all of these things could happen. And a lot of that comes down to the handmade policy, which he says AI complies with the handmade policy. But if you're selling print on demand stuff under handmade, you need to make sure that you're listing your production partner. That's a great way to get shut down. Even though the design itself, the product itself can be listed on the platform, that listing can still be in violation if you're not setting that listing up properly, listing your print on demand partner. And that actually puts it in a subcategory that they call handmade with production assistance. Customers don't know the difference, but it is listed a little bit differently inside of the Etsy ecosystem. So even though using AI to assist in your designs is okay, you still have to make sure that when you're creating the listings, that you're doing everything there on the up and up, that you're using unique images, that your mockups correctly reflect the product. And I saw another story recently, Scott, where somebody was talking with Printify, and they had some back channel communications after the mockup apocalypse, and Etsy came out again and clarified that mockups are fine as long as they accurately represent the product. So if we're doing some print on demand stuff with AI, we need to make sure that we're using accurate mockups and that we're listing the production partner out. Other than that, if you want to use some AI in your designs, go for it, at least according to Etsy CEO.